Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Today I wanted to talk about something that's in the news a lot in various forms, and that's the idea of social justice. But the thing is, I want to talk about it in a slightly different way because there are actually two different forms of social justice. And As a result, I wanted to first explain, analyze those two things, and then put up some various thoughts and ideas that I've discussed at length with others, and especially the negative aspects of one of these two types. So the first definition of social justice is with a small s and a small j, and that is a subset of law. And by definition, by legal definition on an international level, social justice is justice that follows the principle that all individuals, groups, are entitled to fair and impartial treatment. Social justice attempts to prevent abuses of human rights. Social justice is based on notions of equality and equal opportunity in society. It focuses on the full and equal participation of all citizens in economic, social, and political aspects of a nation. And also refers to the advantages and disadvantages as distributed by society. Now, this is in regards to law, as in specifically the legal system, and the way in which things are dealt with. In which case, as an example of the things that are are defined within this area of law, you are looking at things like custody of children and divorce cases to an extent, but you're also looking at things like equal pay, discrimination, and so on and so forth, all of which are covered by legislation, all of which are covered in our country, in the UK, or in my country rather, in the UK, that is covered by the Equal Rights Act of 2010, I believe, is now the piece of legislation that covers it as an umbrella. And before that, I believe it was the Equal Rights Act of 1974. Could be wrong on the year, also on the name, but it's something like that. And as a result, these cover things like religious freedom, various forms of freedom of expression to one extent or another, although we do not have free speech in the UK the same way that it is in say, the United States, to one extent or another, obviously. And it covers things like pay and opportunities in regards to work and things like that. And it's very much a straightforward set of legal mechanisms and guidelines and criteria that need to be followed when dealing with these problems in a court of law or in a workplace or anything like that. And as a result, as said, it is the law. It's the thing that the police will enforce upon. It is the thing that the courts will act upon, and so on and so forth. And I think there's a lawnmower going outside, so I'm sorry if you can hear that. But then you've got the other definition of social justice, and this is the one that's been getting all of the headlines, all of the news, and so on and so forth on a regular basis for at least the last couple of years. And that is with the capital S and the capital J. And this is the form of social justice which has been jumped upon by individuals who are now more or less termed social justice warriors. Again, I believe I've mentioned in other videos, I'm not entirely sure why you'd want to be called a warrior when you're arguing in theory for the peace and betterment of the world, when warrior is an entirely destructive term to one extent or another. But hey ho, that's the people that have taken that on as a badge. There are stranger things that people have taken on. Fair enough, that's entirely up to you. I don't care. But here's where my issues are. A lot of the modern social justice kind of conversation often highlights the oppression of a group who actually has rights, who are protected by the legal small s small j version of social justice. For example, if you are saying that an ethnic minority is oppressed, then ultimately it comes down to, where's the proof? Are they actually being oppressed, and so on and so forth? Chances are no, they aren't, at least within the Western world, simply because their rights are protected. If they aren't doing as well, there are other reasons for it. And those reasons may very well be wide and copious, but the crux of the matter is that social justice, in terms of small s, small j, the legal version, is working very hard to attempt to mediate or rule upon these various different things in regards to the adequate standards of living, in regards to the right to work and equal pay, right to education, the rights on religion and language and culture and all those areas, to make sure that no one is necessarily infringed upon. And this also counts for putting boundaries in place to ensure that the large populations are not infringed upon by small ones for no reason as well. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into the legal side of things, whereby they are doing good work, whereby they are being able to take on new ideas to one extent or another, and then action them to ensure that things are kept reasonable, fair, that everyone has the same actual legal rights, and so on and so forth. But here's the thing: now you have the wider, more chaotic version of social justice, which is essentially a lynch mob mentality, a very much us versus them on a lot of issues, with its capital S and its capital J, just to try and avoid confusion. And it comes in and it muddies the waters. It makes it so hard to see, for those especially in the legal field who are looking at this stuff, it makes it incredibly hard for them to see what's going on and where. And obviously it also comes down to the fact that if you've got individuals who are being pulled into this very ideology, very emotional kind of set of behaviours and actions and groups and so on and so forth, then if you've got those people being drawn into that, then if they then approach the small s, small j version of social justice, they're going to try and push their ideas on that as well. So a couple of examples that I see around this, for example, we've got the gender wage gap, which doesn't exist as a point of any real thing, because the gender wage gap statistically is based more on the kinds of things the different genders are inclined to do with their lives, the amount of time spent at work, sickness, time off for children, other things like that. There are so many contributing factors to that supposed gap, when actually if you have a man and a woman on exactly the same contract doing exactly the same thing, then they should be paid the same, and they almost exclusively are paid the same. And if they aren't, then that means that whoever is paying them is breaking the law, and they can be reported. However, if they're not being reported, and if there's no evidence to demonstrate that, and all it is people complaining, then all it is people complaining. And as a result, you're not going to get anywhere with that, plain and simple. Other things, for example, in regards to the twisting and classification of various things, for such as various people taking the definitions of hate speech and trying to expand them to be any disagreement with their movement, or any issues that they see along the way with others. You know, these, or the things that others say. When you've got that kind of mentality, and if that is allowed to then infect social justice small s, small j, then that means that you're moving towards a very 1984 kind of Orwellian future of thought crime and suppression, when, if you look back at the movements that are now part of the kind of SJW community, all of those movements, all of those things wouldn't have been able to achieve what they did when they were actually relevant if they hadn't had the ability to say what they wanted, the ability to act out, the ability to have some form of equivalence in regards to, at the very least, communication. And so now they feel that they have solidified at least part of their platform, because they achieved their goals, and yet they don't want to stop. They want to keep going. Why would you stop? If you have gained stuff, it's if you take an inch, you may as well take a yard kind of mentality here. And it's highly damaging to the actual legal system that is in place specifically to protect those that interact with it in one form or another, and to try and ensure a very even footing for everyone within a set society. Now, there are places on the planet that, yes, probably could use the kind of revolutionary, marching, protesting, social justice version that is being espoused and being discussed quite regularly. But the thing is, those parts of the world are not where the people are who are making these arguments. Most of these arguments are coming out of the United States, Canada, and parts of Europe. Whilst the places that could use these ideas, at least in their most basic form, not in the somewhat over the top and ridiculous form that they are often presented in, would be places that are poverty stricken, that are still rather separated out into small communities, and places that do not necessarily have a good rule of law or a good respect of everyone within their cultural society as it stands anyway. But I said at the beginning that I wanted to move on into some of the more negative aspects of this, and this is where we're going to start talking about the ideology of the big S, big J social justice, and how they are directly not just in opposition to legal social justice, small s, small j, but also in regards to the way in which people live and the way in which people act. For example, if you have individuals who are protesting things like gender, something that I'm sure I'll go on to do other videos about down the line, then firstly they are ignoring fact to one extent or another, but also they are putting the people that want to go along with that movement, or people that at least feel some sympathy for that movement, in a very hard place, because a lot of the discussions around that area are shaming, they are negative, they are victimizing or self-victimizing in a lot of cases, and quite frankly, as a result of that, that's not a healthy environment. There is a reason why in several medical bodies, including especially the American College of Pediatricians, have come out and said that this stuff is bollocks, because you are trying to put an ideology in place of science, in place of medicine, in place of fact. And this is where some of the issues stem from, because quite frankly, when you are only beholden to an ideology, and it's only the people who also subscribe to that ideology that you want to associate with, or that you consider to be good, then what it comes down to is you're isolating yourself. And considering the amount of pretense and inaccuracy and emotional investment that is so very nebulous in those movements, that doesn't actually allow for an awful lot of just straightforward bonding and communication between people. And that can lead, if you're isolating yourself from the rest of the world, and then the group that you're actually in is very isolating just on a emotional level, because of all these expectations on you, because of all these negatives. It's like being in a cult. The number of people that will buy into it because it's a place where they belong, but then will not actually feel good about it afterwards, or will fight to leave, or will reach a point and then have to withdraw themselves as best they can. It causes a very negative atmosphere that is only really visible when stuff gets so bad that your survival levels are substantially diminished by what you're doing. And so here's the thing. I've talked to a few people, and as I may have mentioned before, I can't remember some of these individuals found that their ideology was something that they had to try and find time to have a break from. And it wasn't just a case of like, oh, well, I needed to have a break from it just because it was a lot to think about and I was very stressed out by it and so on and so forth. You know, I still believed in everything I was saying. It was the fact that they didn't believe in what they were saying. And as a result of not believing in what they were saying, it caused an awful lot of conflict and an awful lot of negativity when that was what they had to say. Or that when that was what they had to try and force themselves to believe and it didn't add up. Or when they had to try and criticise every single little thing for the sake of doing so. Now, some of the main groups that are involved in this, especially within the States at the moment, the third wave of feminism are the racial rights movement and so on and so forth, things like Black Lives Matter to a degree. And it's like in their most basic forms, those movements, those organisations, they have a point, they have a reason, they have a cause, that's fine. The issue is that they have been hijacked by some rather extreme and not particularly nice people who have taken it and driven both of them into the ground. Now, whether you like the ideas of feminism or calling yourself a feminist or not, or whether or not you like the ideas, the basic ideas behind Black Lives Matter or not, or any of the other groups that would in some way feed into this, then here's part of the issue. With, for example, feminism, or even with the racial rights kind of thing. With feminism, you had written into law the equal opportunity between genders and so on and so forth ages ago, coming on 40 years ago. Same with racial rights, whereby you had these issues written into law: equality of opportunity, equality of in regards to general rights for everybody. That was all dealt with quite some time ago. Are there still issues? Yes. Are there likely to always be still some form of issue? Probably. The only time when there will not be any issues are when everyone understands one another, when conversations are not shut down for the sake of the fact that they are uncomfortable conversations, and most importantly, when you do not have random collectives deciding that they know better than laws and governing bodies that have specialised in this, where you have groups of people who have dedicated their entire lives to the study and action of very specific policies and ideas and working practices to make it better, make the world better, make their country better for everybody. Now, as those things are probably still a way off, where you're always going to have people arguing. You know, there was more anti-intellectualism in the news recently. I believe an MP from, I think it was Wales, came out and started complaining about experts or academics or something like that. And granted, I may agree that especially after I worked in a university for a short time, that those places are at times very much like bubbles, and for the people that go into them when they first go to university and then stay there after the fact, yes, it does give them a slightly slanted perspective. However, is that the case for everyone that goes there? No. Is that the case for everyone that leaves there? Also no. Does it mean that there could be things done to improve the environments within those universities? Yes. But when you've got that kind of anti-intellectualism, or you've got the arguments that are continually thrown around, or conversations that are shut down, and things like that, and the ignoring of fact, especially, whether it's come from someone highly qualified or not qualified at all, whether it's come from a document or a piece of footage or whatever else, a fact is a fact and it needs to be adhered to. And so, going back to the individuals that I've talked to about this, because they were having issues with it. So, you know, coaching them through it, on discussing the way in which they interacted with their social group and what they wanted to do and how they could plan around things and whether or not it would work for them, almost every single one of them has essentially renounced their position in whatever organization and distanced themselves from it. And again, realize that during my coaching sessions with people, all I do is ask questions. All I do is reflect back what they have said. If you take what a social justice warrior, especially a particularly zealous one, comes and throws at you, and all you do is wrap it back round on them, then many of them, especially the ones who are reasonable people who actually care about the world around them and want to make it better, and that's why they're doing it, they will at least have a moment of pause whilst they try and wrap their head around how ridiculous what they've just said has sounded. The issue, though, is that it is a social movement. It is an emotional movement. There is very little in the way of fact around that that information overall. And whilst you have an awful lot of people coming out against it and coming out to try and bring those people back to reality because they also care. For example, there was a University of Toronto psychology professor, I believe, who has recently been criticised and stepped on rather hardly or rather harshly rather, for coming out against some of the ideas this social justice movement, capital S, capital J, espouse. And when that's happening, when you've got someone who is there to teach, who is there to care, who is there to try and ensure the best possible level of understanding and so on for the students that they are with, then quite frankly, when those individuals are being brushed aside or criticised or crushed purely for trying to point out some facts or purely for trying to get people to address things themselves instead of just having things handed to them, that is where things start to fall down. Again, as said, I worked on a university campus for a time, and I was able as a result to observe the students coming through and the faculty coming through. As I was helping with I was working within a store on the campus at the time, and looking at everything that I saw there, all of the information that I gathered, and the fact that also the majority of people that I've coached have been from some of the various universities up and down the UK, considering that is considering that's where a lot of my observations and these discussions have come from, it's distressing to see so many young people feeling so conflicted over matters that have been not entirely dealt with. As said, there is always room for improvement to one degree or another, but have ultimately been written into law. There is a form of justice already attached to these, and it is sufficient because it is egalitarian in nature. Considering that is the case, and yet these people are still feeling so conflicted and wound up about these various things and the people that they're interacting with and so on and so forth, considering that is the case, and they're having to come to someone like myself for an intervention, a form of intervention, to help them muddle their way through what's in their head and what's in their life to come out with a way to then move towards their goals and things in spite of this being around them. Again, it speaks to how detrimental this social movement is when there's ultimately very little there to really need it around. If it's already all in law, if it's already all dealt with, then it's just a case of if you feel you are being disadvantaged unfairly on whatever grounds, then fine, find evidence, like actual evidence, i.e. statistics, contracts, and other forms of written agreement, whatever, and take them to the authorities because those people are, to one degree or another, breaking the law. Now, a lot of the time you will not find this because you are not actually being hard done by, you just maybe don't feel particularly good about things. However, if there is evidence to support it, then you will be helped. And yes, sometimes it will take a long time for you to get the help, support, recompense, whatever, that you are seeking. However, those mechanisms, those pieces of legislation are in place to ensure that you get it at some point. However, if you're looking to follow the capital S, capital J social justice form of problem solving, then what you are essentially doing is attempting a lynch mob. And you can look back through history and see that pretty much every movement that has fueled itself through anger, rage, upset, and through hunting people down with a very much a mob mentality, almost every single one of those movements has crumbled, and many of them are no longer apparent, and the ones that are much, much smaller and far less widespread than they were at the time. So I can only think that that is likely to happen to the social justice movement as it stands at the moment, because as much as they may do and say and flounder around and try and corrupt other systems with what they are doing and saying, unfortunately facts are somewhat unbending, and they are particularly powerful things when you try and face off against them. But yes, this is a mix of my ideas, the observations and the conversations that I've had, the fact of the matter, and the fact that there is an awful lot of confusion between social justice, i.e. a part of the legal system that protects people, and the insanity of certain groups that are slowly corrupting and damaging various systems within our society, especially Western society at the moment, where it's become a case of we have come so far, and yet now you are having groups, for example, arguing for segregation, something that was deliberately removed by the ancestors of the same people that are arguing for it now. It's a nonsense. It's insane. But anyway, tell me what you guys think. Social justice in terms of which side do you feel is better? The social justice that is actually part of a legal system, or the lynch mob? Do you feel that there are other ways beyond purely education, use of fact, and conversation that could be employed to remedy the issues that people are having all over the world in this regard? I'd love your input, and before someone comes in and says just get rid of all of them, it's not a possibility. We're all on one planet, we're all the same people. This is part of the problem with the us versus them mentality. Social justice is a set of mechanisms for everybody. It doesn't matter who you are. It's unthinking. It's an objective egalitarian system. Trying to remove one group over another, pointless. Absolutely pointless. We're all the same people. There is no us versus them. Everything that's affecting one group is going to affect another within the given environment. There's no two ways about it. In which case, the conversations need to start happening, and the people need to start calming down and relaxing and dealing with fact, instead of just going off and flying off the handle at every possible opportunity, because all that does is cause further problems and undermine the systems that would otherwise be protecting those people in the first place. Anyway, that's my 2 cents, and that's what I've got. I'm sure I'll end up doing more of these videos in the future, because quite frankly it is a problem for especially young people. It's something that is infecting their lives and causing them all manner of issues, and it's something that I have bumped up against numerous times, either in regards to just simple conversations with young people who find it very interesting, or that they find it is in one way or another infringing on their lives when they're not part of it, or they are people that have come to me because they are genuinely not happy, and one of the main reasons for that is that they have ascribed to this ridiculous, insane mob mentality kind of cult almost set of activities whereby they are always feeling shamed, they are always feeling self-loathing and negativity towards themselves and those that are like them, instead of attempting to foster more collaboration and understanding. Anyway, please let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and otherwise drop me a like if you found this at all interesting, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.